Hi, I'm Jay from Real Street Performance. Today we're going to talk about land speed racing. Unlike other types of racing, land speed racing is a single driver on a closed course doing a speed trial. So it's you up against yourself, it's you up against a set of rules, it's you up against the weather conditions, trying to go as fast as you can for the set distance of the course. There are courses that are as short as 1 mile, and there are courses that are as long as 9 miles. There's two different venues that we've been competing at. There's El Mirage, which is a 1.3 mile dry lake bed about 100 miles north of Los Angeles, California. It's a very much different environment than the Bonneville Salt Flats. You basically have 1.3 miles of racetrack. The name of the game is to get off the starting line as fast as possible, accelerate as quickly as possible, and get through that speed trap just like you would in a quarter-mile drag race. Now, Bonneville is quite a bit different. When the salt's in good condition, it's as hard and as grippy as asphalt. You have 5 miles of race course available, with shutdown going out to 7 and 9 miles depending on conditions. Setting a record at El Mirage is fairly simple. You have a 1.3 mile course. You only have to make one run that's faster than the previous record in order to achieve that record and become a part of the club out at El Mirage. Setting a record at Bonneville is quite a bit different. First, you have to qualify on either an existing record or an open record. In order to qualify on that existing record or open record, they're going to be tracking your speed over the course of a mile. So it's not that you went a peak speed and that qualifies you. They're going to be checking your entry speed and your exit speed over a mile, and it has to be over the existing speed or qualifying speed for that particular record. Once you've successfully made your qualifying run, you're not in the record book just yet. You need to be able to back that run up, and you need to back it up in the same section of the course that you qualified on. So if you ran fast in the 3 mile, you need to run fast in the 3 mile again. The sum of both the entry and the exit speed of both runs is your average, and that's what's going to go in the book. So if you're asking yourself why somebody would choose to race on either a dry lake bed of dirt or a dry lake bed of salt, well, that's pretty easy to answer. There's just not a lot of venues that you can have sanctioned, safe, legal racing over these distances. So this isn't something that you can legally do on a highway. And these events have been taking place for a very, very long time. Post-World War II, there was a lot of racing going on. People needed a place to do it. They found the lake beds, sanctioning bodies were formed. The rest is history. So you're participating in a large piece of American history and racing history at either one of these venues. And that bleeds right into the culture of the people that are doing this stuff, and to me that makes it even more fun. So land speed racing is quite a bit different than the drag racing I had become accustomed to. In land speed racing, you're not racing an opponent in the lane next to you, you're racing against a record book. So you could be qualifying to run on a record that's a year old or 10 years old. You could be at an event that there's another competitor running on that same record. So some records do pass back and forth, and there are some other records in the book that have been there for a really long time. Another difference that I experienced between drag racing and land speed racing was there's no money involved in land speed racing. There's no prize involved. You qualify on a record, you get your name in the book, you get a hat, and you become a part of the club. The behavior amongst the people in the club is outstanding. You have a really great group of people that become a family instantly, really look out for one another. There's no bickering, there's no bad behavior. It's just not tolerated. It's really a neat group of people out there. And I think that is partially because there's not money involved. Now, for those of you that looked at some of the tires that we race on, the tires are generally narrow. Some of them don't have any tread at all. That's a lot to do with the speed rating of the tire. The tread is weight, and the centrifugal force of the tire at speed can cause the tire to separate. So without any tread, traction is dicey at times, but again, it's a lot to do with the conditions of the surface. Modern traction control is a big help. We've been working on different speed sensor configurations to really nail down a tractable setup. So far, we've just made runs with using the driver and the driver's feedback to feed throttle to manage traction. At Bonneville, it's not as much of a big of a deal because you have such a large distance to cover that it's not as much of a drag race as it is El Mirage. El Mirage is kind of a different animal in its own, and traction control will be greatly appreciated on that surface. Another thing you'll notice about land speed racing is most of these vehicles leave the starting line with a push truck. That's because they don't have the gear ratio available to get the car moving or vehicle moving quickly under its own power. So if you have a car that's geared to go 200, 300, 400 miles an hour, it doesn't have the mechanical advantage in first gear to get going on its own very well. So you use a push truck to get you up to 60 or 70 miles an hour, where then the vehicle can power off and away from there. Another difference you'll notice in these land speed racing cars is the attempt to keep the engine temperatures under control. So where a standard vehicle would have either a small radiator or no radiator, when you're drag racing, you're dealing with these vehicles that have these big water tanks, a lot of water pump available, a lot of water pressure available, and anything you can do to maintain temperature, because as soon as temperatures start to run away, that's when you're going to get into detonation and blown engines. And because you're wide open throttle for 3, 4, 5 miles out at Bonneville, you really want to keep those temperatures under control to keep the engine alive. Because again, qualifying on a run is one thing, but you've got to successfully make that backup run, or you've missed it and you've got to go try it another time. Another question we had is, if you took a car like our white car, a car that can go 6-second quarter miles, 200 mile an hour quarter miles, what would it run in 5 miles? And a lot of that's going to be gearing dependent. So the first thing you do is you change the gearing of the vehicle, and then you'd put weight in it. So you'd probably try to put at least 1,000 pounds of weight low in the car to try to gain traction. Then you'd go to Bonneville, and then you'd have some aerodynamic restrictions. So it's a short car. What would the aero do? A car like that would easily have 300 mile an hour potential if it stayed straight and stayed on the ground. So there's a safety aspect to it that you kind of have to explore. And again, each class has different aerodynamic modification restrictions. So you'd want to pick a class that maybe you end up with a big spoiler and a pointy nose, kind of like that little red Datsun, which is all that's keeping it safe. Because again, these short cars going very fast, if they do get crossed up, it normally gets pretty ugly quick. Another consideration with a car like our white car would be horsepower. So yes, the car can make over 2,000 horsepower, and that's how we've gone 6-second quarter miles with it. You wouldn't run it at 2,000 horsepower out at Bonneville. You need a way to manage that heat. Again, it's all about heat management. If you're racing a car in 1/8 mile, quarter mile, 5 mile, the better control you have over the engine temperatures, the more likely you're going to have a living engine at the end of the race. As soon as temperatures start to get away from an engine, that's where things start to really unravel. So when you consider the calibration or ignition timing and fueling approach that you take in a 1/8 mile environment, it's much more aggressive than you would have in a long run like you'd have at Bonneville. So Bonneville, you may have a car that, let's just say, for example, the car could make 1,500 horsepower. You may run it at 1,000 and start to kind of creep up on it and see how it lives, because you don't want to go out there on an event that only happens a couple times a year, put everything in the oil pan in 1 mile and have to sit around all week while everyone else is having fun. Another question I've had is, why would you go to Bonneville? And there's a lot of things that you do in life that are fun. So if you're into riding wheelies, into racing, whatever it is that you find joy doing, well, if you're doing it for a short period of time, like drag racing, well, doing the same thing for a longer period of time, it's more fun. So, when you consider the opportunity to have a car wide open for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, and you get to go 300 miles an hour for 2 miles, the headspace experience, the whole thing, the vibe is completely different. And I don't know how to get it on a short fix after experiencing it at places like Bonneville. Another really neat thing about Bonneville is the diversity of engines out there. The engine classes are broken up in 12 different steps of displacement. So you can have an engine that's under 31 cubic inches or an engine that's over 500 cubic inches. This breeds an environment that you get to experience and listen to a bunch of different engines in the same course of an event, which, unlike most drag races, you kind of only hear V8s or only hear 4-cylinders, and other than the imports versus domestics, you don't get to really see a lot of diversity under a group of racers. Bonneville has an extreme amount of very innovative vehicles that has way different platforms and way different engines, and it's just a really neat experience to get to see some of that stuff in person. Now, if you're thumbing through the rule book and you see that there's a gas class and a fuel class, gas is going to be a spec gasoline. So for example, whenever we run one of the vehicles on gas, we're using a VP C16 gasoline. The tech guy comes by, he watches you put the fuel in the gas tank, he seals the gas tank, and that seal has to be present when you're doing your record runs, because if not, they don't know what's in the gas tank. If you're running in the fuel class, it is the Wild West. You can use ethanol, methanol, nitromethane, whatever your heart desires, whatever you can make go bang inside of a cylinder, wide open, have at it. That's the fuel class. I hope this video has been helpful in answering some of the questions you may have about land speed racing. If you have any other questions, feel free to comment down below and I'll be as helpful as I can. Thanks and have a good day.